All right, ready? Okay, welcome to the Board of Selectmen special meeting. Today's Friday, February 28th, 2025. Let's all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Carl Guernsey will lead us in the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. The first item on the agenda is purchasing authority to hear, consider, and act on authorizing the purchasing authority to enter into the proposed contract between the town of Fairfield and Svigals and Partners, an FCA company of New Haven, Connecticut, to provide all labor and necessary and all else necessary for architectural and engineering services, facilities development for Fairfield Board of Education and Senior Center, as detailed in Town of Fairfield RFP number 2025-34, and Svigals RFP submission dated January 28, 2025, for a total contract value not to exceed $674,658, with additional authority to enter into necessary change orders in an amount not to exceed the approved funding for this project. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second. I think we're starting with Wendy, or do you want to start with something, Adam, because your name's on this?
Yeah, I'll get started.
Wendy will walk us through it.
Yeah, just to go over the purchasing process first. We put out this RFP. We received five submissions from very qualified firms. We brought 3 in for interviews, and Svigals was the highest rated across the group that was on the RFP panel. So we've brought this contract forward for you all now to approve.
Fantastic. Wendy, do you want to take us through the RFP and the response?
Sure. Good afternoon. Thank you, Selectmen and Selectwomen. So as Adam stated, we all parties agreed on Svigals. Something to note is we had a scope review meeting on the 21st as a group, and in the addendum materials there is a summary outline of an updated engineering scope of work. We decided to award a different engineering company than the original proposal. So that is included in the addendum materials. So the Svigals scope of work will include the sites that we've discussed before. Dwight Elementary is the core scope of work. That work will kick off in March, and the project is projected to end August 1st. There are additional sites that we're looking at, including Mona Terrace, Giant Steps, Riverfield, Osborne Hill, and Jennings, which relate to additional feasibility studies for the senior center, as well as the ECC and healthcare facility options. Svigals will be providing site borings for the project. In particular, I think many parties raised concerns with the Dwight boring studies. So the new engineer will provide 2 days worth of site borings, which is a great thing to have. The scope of work is outlined in the backup materials, but each site will have a conditions assessment, a site conditions assessment, environmental, and we'll work with different stakeholders and put together an advisory committee for the programming and utilization assessment of each site. And then we'll move forward with looking at the different concepts and site plans for each location, as well as code compliance And then our engineering consultant will provide the engineering evaluations as outlined in the addendum materials. And then we'll have a separate costing consultant that Spiegels will subcontract to provide the cost estimations. And then once all of the work for Dwight, Mona Terrace, Giant Steps, Riverfield, Osborne, and Jennings are all done, and they're done in a concurrent manner. Once all of those site reports are done, we'll see the team start to hone in July on the final report, which will then be delivered to us, the town and the Board of Ed. August 1 is the projected completion date.
Yeah, do you mind if we?
Please.
Okay.
If you have any questions, please feel free to
Yeah,
ask.
Christine.
Who is the engineer?
The engineer is SLR.
And in our backup, we don't have the full what was submitted. What has this firm done? Do we have a past history with them?
Yes, they are currently doing work for the town, I believe, including some of the detention pond work at Villa Avenue. I think it's the same firm as
You're talking about SLR.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what about
Eagles?
yeah.
Spiegels, to my knowledge, the town has not contracted before, but we did discuss the firm with other districts. They're actually doing some work in Westport and I believe in Bridgeport. The Board of Ed felt comfortable moving forward with Spiegels and has discussed the firm with other districts.
Mr. Testani said that he called around about Spiegels and had really high, a lot of his contacts had high regard for them. So that was helpful.
And I did check when I knew this was going to be on the agenda. I did check in with Mr. Papa George also, and he also voiced his support for this choice. And my understanding, he was part of the review committee that chose the contractor. Just for the backup, just for clarification, these spreadsheets that were posted, it's outlined by the different scenarios. And at Dwight, for scenario 1A, there's just zeros across the line for septic. Is that, and I know having, sometimes when we review these contracts, sometimes the fee is captured in one of the other line items. Now with Dwight, being that there are so many scenarios, is it just a question of where it lies in the spreadsheet? And is this basically the second engineering update capture everything? Just want to make sure that for all the scenarios we're looking at, the septic options for
good question.
Build, renovate like new, renovate with the addition, renovate without the addition, and so forth. Because depending on where the building is, how big the building is, that might impact the septic location.
Yes, so good question, and that's the, if you refer to the addendum materials labeled Fairfield Schools Feasibility Study, 6 school sites, that does outline the septic evaluation. This is the summary matrix from SLR, the updated engineering firm. So I would use that number if you're looking for a breakout of the septic work, and it includes all of the Dwight scenarios.
The sewer. And that wouldn't be an issue for the other properties because they're not on septic. And we covered this in one of our prior meetings, just in terms of getting on the state's priority list and communicating with the state about possible grant reimbursement in the future. Understanding is that we probably aren't going to meet the timeline for June 1st submission. There was some talk about special legislation. I see as part of this contract, there is work with, working with the state on the process. I don't know if it's too soon, if you can speak to just what you foresee that looking like, and if there's any deadlines that targeting out of the gate.
Sure. Will we specifically asked about the process, and Spiegels will actually be reaching out as soon as the project kicks off to let the state know that they've been contracted to on this particular project, to give them a heads up that this is coming. And from what I understand, if there's special legislation that we can request, we will be working with the Board of Ed on that effort to see if we can ask for funding earlier than the typical mid-year request. So
That would
the
be with
earliest
state reps too, right?
with state reps as well, yes. That's my understanding.
The advisory committee for each site, how soon do you think that those committees would be selected, that you mentioned?
Right.
We talked about this before, because obviously for Mona Terrace, looking at that for different, not only potential school use, but also for the health department, senior center. Now that Mr. Calabrese is going to be working closely in that building also, I imagine he would be, and Mr. Marco would be part of that advisory committee, and the health director, but I'll let you.
So we also talked about this at our scope review meeting, and I think really we'll be working with the architect right away at the kickoff, which we project to be next week or early March, to make recommendations on who those like the steering committee or the advisory committee parties would be. But of course, recommendations from the board and the different departments would be welcome.
I haven't had time to circle back with Wendy on that. I think you probably heard the commitment that we made to have like a building committee, a small building committee affixed to it, but we haven't worked through the details of that. Yeah.
Well, I'm not even talking about,
Oh, okay.
right,
Okay.
specifically for the school sites for a building committee, but we had talked about just an advisory committee, and I think in the RFP, there was like a needs assessment for each building. And part of that, I would assume, would be talking to key stakeholders who would ultimately be using those buildings. And we talked, the Board of Ed's already involved, but for possible,
Okay.
if the health department.
other
were-
sites.
Yeah, the health, really Mona Terrace, when we're talking about.
Yeah.
What, given the opportunity for moving into a new location, if we're gonna go through this process for feasibility, I think it's important just to get other town departments that might be affected part of the
That's really-
conversation sooner rather than later.
Do you think, I'm sorry, like, do you think for like the work on like Osborne, Riverfield, like, should we have Riverfield stakeholders as well? Probably, right?
I mean, and I
Those
don't,
might be quick and they may not be very, very detailed studies. I don't know.
well, and I don't wanna get too far ahead with this, but I think that just, as you're having these initial meetings, just something to think about in terms of in terms of the programs that are going to go in the building.
Honestly, I've only been really thinking about the Dwight piece of it, but you're right. Every piece should have a separate, but the Board of Ed should be part of all of them. And then other stakeholders might be depending on the site.
Well, yeah, and I'm really, the Board of Ed is involved right now, but there are other town departments that are potentially could be impacted, especially when talking about the two town properties right now that are being used for town purposes, Mona Terrace and Giant Steps. And the Giant Steps property I know is part of the Parks and Rec master plan. The school districts, aside from using Walter Fitzgerald, when we signed that contract, the town pretty much was clear at the time that they wanted to reserve the right to decide what happens to the rest of the property. So just being that we're going through feasibility for town use, just want to make sure that we're not leaving out certain
Right.
department heads as part of the conversation. The school piece, I think, are pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
I know a lot of focus has been on Dwight in relation to this, but we are making the investment. This is a town project, just being a little bit.
Yeah, we should talk a little more in depth offline, because I hadn't really thought of the fact that, you know, if we're gonna do something for Mona Terrace, would the same building committee involved with Dwight be on the Mona Terrace piece of it? Probably, right? Yeah,
I mean, that's something that
Okay.
I think that for initial meetings, if we provide this gets approved, it sounds like you could be meeting as early as next week, that, and we're here just giving you some feedback.
Right.
Something to think about. Now with the RFP, I remember there was language that once the work begins, if something comes up, that you could change course. You know, say for argument's sake, you look at the septic system at Dwight and it's total, like, you think that you're gonna be able to put a septic system here in order to support a new build, and it's totally impossible, or vice for the renovate like new, you start doing environmental testing and find a problem. I'm assuming or hoping that you might say, let's reevaluate.
Absolutely. So we'll be having lockstep meetings as we go along. And again, we'll be starting with Dwight first. I think one thing to note is the request for the monies does not include a contingency. So to your point, if something comes up, I would recommend that we put in a request for a 10% contingency on top of the amount that we've noted in the documents. To address any needs assessments or additional, site boardings, et cetera, that we may need, above and beyond the $674,700. Plus,
So that would be an amendment to this. We would add, are you thinking 10%? Because or we could, right now at we're approving 674, 658. But if you want to add contingency, I didn't realize, is there no contingency in this number, or?
well, we put that the request includes any
Yeah.
necessary change order, so we can address it in that.
In that way, we don't
Yeah.
need to vote on it. With the way it's written, you have up to $1 million.
Correct.
Okay, so we're good then, right?
Well, not for this contract. This contract, we're just approving,
With an amount to enter into necessary change orders.
we're approving the 674,658.
Right,
Now, there's more funding potentially available, but,
with this, I mean, that's part of the project, right? Or,
well, I think that we didn't, at the time that the boards approved the initial 1 million, we were trying to get the ball rolling, that there wasn't a whole lot of backup that got us to that $1 million. And I think that there was discussion that we thought it was going to be less, and it is. So I don't know, like.
I'm thinking we approved $1 million though for this project, so we should be able to do change orders up to $1 million then, right? The way this is worded, it kind of looks that way, right? The approved funding
for
is $1
this.
million.
So what is it? And then the change orders would be, do you think that we should include that language in this motion?
What?
That it's up to $1 million?
Well, it's at the approved funding. You would just make it more clear, like up to not to exceed the approved funding in parentheses, $1 million for this project or something like that. Would you want to insert that?
Well, I'm kind of not really, I feel like that's sort of, doesn't align with the bid process. That we chose a vendor based on ranking and also cost. And usually there would have been, and maybe Adam, I don't have, like, we don't have the full, all the backup that we sometimes get with contracts. Like, was the bid, did
It's
they?
in the backup, online, you get the whole.
Well, we usually get it. Yeah, all right, I don't have a.
Yeah, so I believe if there are change orders that we want to approve, the way it's worded, it looks like we have no issue going up to $1 million.
Okay.
But if you wanted to clarify that.
No, I mean,
Okay.
we'll have to, and the working group would vote on the change orders?
Yeah, right, that typically,
Typically, something like this would be it would be in go to a building, it would be in a building committee.
yeah, so
I just
that
wanted-
would be then, yeah, it would have to be part of the working group. I mean, most of our projects for the town, it would be, if change order was put forward, it would be reviewed by whoever's in charge of the project, then they would have to bring it to me for approval up to the approved amount.
Okay, I mean, just for some of the other contracts that we've approved, even though the funding is. We've approved contracts for change orders within the amount that we're actually voting on. So I guess this is,
Well, we
I don't-
voted for $1 million.
but we voted for the million,
This
not
is just on the-
necessarily knowing
Right.
and thinking that it was gonna come in for less. But yes, with the town boards did approve up to $1 million.
Up to $1 million.
if needed. Okay. We'll-
So this is the bid, but we're recognizing possible change orders, which hopefully there won't be any, but I would imagine there's a decent chance there will be, because we have put it out there that the Board of Ed could ask for additional work, and that, yeah.
Okay.
If I could just add, this is just a sort of a simple language change that we decided to make at some point in the last couple months, where we stopped putting a specific contingency or change order amount and instead decided to change it to read that it's just up to whatever dollar amount has been approved for the project. Sort of the idea being that if a certain amount of money has already been approved, there's no need to have to go back to the board until we exceed that amount.
That makes sense. In the past, you used to put like 10% or something like that, but that makes more sense. If we approved $1 million, then we should have up to $1 million, right?
Yeah, this was an attempt to simplify. If there's ways we can tweak this, though, I'm happy to adjust it moving forward.
Okay, thanks for voicing that, because clarifies because this is slightly different and new and makes more sense to me, and it's going to be easier.
Yeah, I just want to. Maybe I'm not the most trusting in terms of, I wouldn't want necessarily let a contractor to know, like, okay, you put a bid in, we went through competitive bidding, we chose you based on this, but you have another potentially $300,000 that you could.
But for a project like this,
so as long as
probably would be driven, most of that would be driven by us, I would imagine, like, changing, like if the Board of Ed says, or if the group says we forgot to look at maybe a second field or something like that, like.
all right, well, they'll be reporting out on this, so if something else comes up that this isn't, we will be for future meetings, reporting out through the Board of Selectmen, or if the building committee gets put together, and through the Board of Ed, I'm sure they're gonna be following this as well. All right, I probably could go on, but this for the purpose of the contract, I think I'm good for now.
Thank you, Wendy. Yeah. So we're gonna go out to the public for comment. We have Board of Ed members here. Would you like to speak? Yeah, probably just make sure you're on.
Thanks so much for this opportunity, and I actually just received the addendum as I was arriving here. I didn't see it ahead of time. So I'm trying to respond to that, and I guess this might be something that's really obvious to everyone else, but I'm wondering, we talked about if some of these scenarios come to the point where they're not feasible, For example, if we look at Dwight and the renovation isn't because of the septic or whatever it is, what happens to this, like the adjustments to the payments? Like, do we continue to do the traffic stuff? Like, are those adjusted with the engineer? I mean, are they adjusting our payments? I mean, it's really a question for you, but I don't. I mean,
Yeah,
you were
so-
talking about a contingency above, but I'm talking about, but what if we don't do it? What happens with the reimbursement?
Yeah, can we sort of vote to suspend like
Well,
Robert?
I feel that given this really is, I feel
Yeah.
especially
All
for.
in favor of, I would like to make a motion to suspend the
Yeah, I
rules,
wasn't sure. I
allow
thought it
back and
was
forth
here.
dialogue on this
I mean,
issue.
especially with board members who
Yeah.
have a vested interest and
So-
expertise in this, so.
Second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead. Only because I'm always telling people this isn't Q and A, but
No,
given
that's
it's-
fine. I didn't know if it was like a meeting that, anyway,
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So let's do back and forth.
All right. So I guess I'm just wondering if that's something that you've considered. I mean, it's the money isn't in the Board of Ed's hands, but what happens?
The
in
best
those
person to
scenarios?
ask is probably Wendy, and I know you've thought through this. If something becomes not feasible, what would you recommend that, we would take it off the list and move forward, right, with other options?
Absolutely, and that's why we broke it out in such detail by scope and by different consultants, so that would be a credit back if we decided not to go down that road.
Okay, so it is a credit. And then I guess just like in terms of the timing, I mean, this is something that the Board of Ed members have brought up over and over again, the concerns around that. So we're talking about August 1st, that's like several months later than was sort of agreed upon in the beginning. It was like a 4 or 5 month time period. So we're past that. And so just trying to understand, I mean, I know you started answering this, but just really wanting to get a handle of, do we know that this is gonna meet the state submission deadlines? Because if it doesn't, we're incurring like a huge percentage increase on our cost when we build it out late, just a year later pushes our waterfall in a really dangerously expensive direction. So that's like a
Yeah.
really critical point, is the timeline. And I know it's something that, you've heard from board
Yeah, I
members throughout, so I'm
think-
like kind of trying to echo that again, like, hey, this is something that's really important. Like the August 1st deadline is in my mind too late, but if you are saying that, in fact, that our experts here are saying that it still will work, I mean, I'm not sure what
Yeah,
you're
I
saying.
mean, I'll answer that, and you can chime in afterwards if you don't, I don't think we ever said 4 or 5 months here. So I think we said originally 10 months. And I think that's on record, and the reason is that I don't feel terribly bad about that is I know that you would have taken this through the process, and if you had presented this to the Board of Finance, it was going to fail and you were going to miss that deadline anyway. So that with that in mind, the feedback that we've gotten from both Angelus, Papa George, and with our state reps is there are opportunities to get funding. But I'm not going to promise that there's a typical process which we're not going to meet. And I will say you would not have met it in your original trajectory. So I don't feel that it's fair to say that you would have met it, because I am certain that you wouldn't have. So either way, you would have missed that deadline of the end of June. You would have liked it to meet it, but you wouldn't. So I mean, in my opinion, and many others' opinions. So we're just going to do the best that we can to try to make this happen. And we make, to the extent you can help us lobby our state reps to get funding, but we can't promise anything.
Yeah, so I mean, that's definitely your opinion. I mean, it was the opinion of many board members that we would be on track for that, so
Not Board of Finance.
Board of Education, we're the ones
right.
that voted for this project. So just like wanted to communicate to you that there are cost escalations that are related to the deference of this, as we defer this project. So everyone can understand that that is going to hit our waterfall if that happens.
Right.
And it's a huge number, so
Yes,
making
and
sure everyone
those,
knows that.
the way I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, well, and it beyond the cost, it's the cost that we have, the human cost to our students that are, in this building for additional time. So just communicating that on behalf of the board. And I think,
Right.
You had made a comment about the Board of Ed was comfortable with Spiegel. And I just want to clarify, it would be like the central office, because our board, I mean, we didn't vote on this particular engineer,
Right.
so just
Okay,
so,
full public
just
Right,
so,
sort of.
just.
yeah, so
Basically, the
just to,
administration asked around, they're comfortable with Spiegel's.
so just want to cover that. So anyways, just really the timeline, I mean, it's so critical for the work that we do. So August 1st puts us in a really precarious place, and
That is where we are. You know, they're not committing to go faster. I mean, so that is where we are. So what we should do is try to, like Wendy said, try to start gearing up the state and our state reps, and they are very well aware. Yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. And we have David Krasnoff on. Do you want to speak, or Angeles or Jeff? Anyone? Jen Jacobson, would you like to speak?
Just really quickly. Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry. I just have one really quick question for Wendy, if possible. If Wendy could please confirm that hazardous materials assessments for all of these sites are contained within the environmental site line for each of the scenarios. I just want to make sure that we're and funding in here to do extensive hazardous materials assessments.
Yes, so that's part of the scope that I was discussing about the contingency. There are different levels of environmental site assessments, ESA 1 and ESA 2. We have add alternates for those from the new engineer, which is why I noted it as a recommendation to hold some monies for anything that comes up as a contingency.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that possibly the difference between this and the $1 million may fall within environmental. Okay, thank you so much. That's just the question. Thank you.
Jeff, Mr. Peterson.
Along those lines, Wendy, that the environmental is testing, right? Not, okay, yeah, all right. Jeff, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I want to thank my board members for representing us very well in my stead down there at Town Hall. A couple of things. I'm glad, Christine, that you addressed the issue with the septic. That's something actually that I texted Eli about earlier today. So it was, kind of on. You can't miss it if it's on scenario 1A. It's right there. Also, to kind of Carol's point earlier, yes, yeah, I know that in the working group has talked about the whole funneling concept. Which, I think through the whole process, I think has been a reasonable way to approach this, kind of get the broadest matrix possible, but, filter it, slim it down when we can so that we can focus better on the work that is likely to get done. And I will also say about the Spiegels, I was, and thank you to Mr. Gerber for allowing me to do this. I was an observer in the shortlist interviews, and I will say about them that I was very impressed with them. Because of the candidates, I felt like they had a very good grasp of what the student experience in both the project and the final product would be, and that was a takeaway that I had with them. So I look forward to working with them as we go forward. Thank you, and I encourage you to approve this.
May I ask you, Wendy, a question? For the funneling process, do you think that as this kicks off, there's going to be sort of a timeline that they're going to adhere to in terms of coming back with details that will allow us to funnel, or will it just be sort of it takes, each phase takes as long as it takes? Or
No, we'll definitely be putting together a more detailed schedule. I think the first thing that we want to do is make sure we do the site assessments and the borings and get that done first. That will enlighten us, I believe, and to be able to do that out of the gate will help.
okay.
Similar to like Mona Terrace, I would assume just even looking at the flood map and what the parameters there could just lead in a different direction in terms of recommendations.
Right.
I can't wait to hear what's going on in Giant Steps. That building is my. I'm so curious to see what that report comes back.
It looks like a horror show, and yet there are components of that look awesome, and it all, like, I think it's all going to depend on
whether the rust is surface or work through. Yeah, so
We're doing a pool later as this moves forward to see what you think the scenario for that site's gonna be.
for which one?
The giant steps.
For Giant Steps. Yeah, yeah.
All right.
So anyone else want to speak? David or Angelus?
George is traveling, so.
All right. Oh, Angelus is on the road. Okay. Hearing none, we're going to bring it back to the board for a vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Congratulations, Wendy, and congratulations to everyone. And actually, I'm thrilled that it's August 1st and not August 31st. So that I wasn't sure where that was going to end up. Thank you so much. So go into executive session, but I don't see right here. So we're going to go into executive session. So item 4, human resources. Thanks, Carol. Executive session with Acting Fire Chief Kieran Dunn, Chief Operating Officer David Becker, and Human Resources Director Kathleen Simpson to discuss a personnel matter related to an employee of the Fairfield Fire Department. Possible action after executive session to approve Deputy Fire Chief contracts. So.
I'm sorry, if I lock the meeting though, no one can get in. If you're gonna do that now, and then I lock the meeting, nobody can get into it if they're, or are they all in person? Are they coming in here?
It will be in person. They're actually right down the hall.
Okay.
So, motion to go into executive session with Acting Fire Chief Dunn, Kieran Dunn, Chief Operating Officer David Becker, Human Resources Director Kathleen Simpson. We have a motion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay, we're in executive session. Sheila, how are you? Good.
Off? Yeah, but not yet.
Safe travels, Anne.
That doesn't call.
Jeff, are we good? Yeah, he's
Who's
good with the
on?
camera. Yep, we're good.
Okay, motion to come out of executive session,
So moved.
seconded, all in favor, say aye. Aye, we are out of executive session. So we're gonna hear, so a motion to approve, the contracts, relating to, the two contracts relating to Deputy Chief, Patrick Barry and Roger Case. They have a motion.
Moved.
Seconded, all in favor of approving these two contracts for deputy, to make Deputy Chief or interim Deputy Chief, Roger Case and Patrick Barry permanent Deputy Chiefs. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Approved. Congratulations, gentlemen. And here.
Get adjourned.
David, do you want to do like this?
Oh, motion to adjourn.
Get to adjourn.
Oh.
Mike's down.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Seconded, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Okay.